to those who hold the pen that shapes the world's perception, to those who twist truth into propaganda and suffering into spectacle, to the editors, the producers, the anchors who smile while empires bleed nations dry. This is not a plea. This is not diplomacy. This is an open letter from a son of Africa who will not bow. For decades you have framed Africa as the eternal tragedy, a continent of chaos waiting to be saved by the same hands that looted it. You report our resistance as rebellion, our sovereignty as instability, our unity as a threat. You call me a young radical, a militant populist, a dangerous nationalist, but never a patriot. You fear the man who loves his people more than your approval. You never saw this Africa. You don't broadcast our dignity as because your empire depends on our humiliation. You feed your audiences the myth of the helpless Africa, while your corporations extract our gold, our uranium, our souls. You ask why we are breaking ties with France? You ask why we reject your military bases, your aid packages, your conditional friendships? It is because we finally understand the power of narrative tumble, and we will no longer allow our story to be told by those who profit from our silence. I speak to you not as a president alone, but as the voice of every African mother who has buried a son because of your wars, as the echo of every African father who could not compete with your imported poverty, as the heartbeat of every African child who wonders why their future must be sold in Western stock markets. You created the illusion that you are the referees of freedom, but you are players rigging the match, hiding your fouls, and calling the whistle only when Africa starts to win. No more time. We are not the subjects of your documentaries. We are not the charity cases of your annual fundraisers. We are not waiting for your savior complex to expire. We are rising, and with no apologies, this is only the beginning. Our story is being rewritten by our own hands, in our own voice, with our own blood, if necessary. And this time the world will listen. Manufactured outrage and selective silence. You speak of democracy, but only when it serves your investments. You praise elections, but only when your preferred puppet wins. You cry out for press freedom, but stay silent when your allies jail our journalists. You champion human rights, but only when it's convenient for your headlines. Where was your outreach when African children were dying under sanctions you helped design? Where were your tears when foreign mercenaries destabilized our nations under your silent sponsorship? Where was your journalism when our forests were razed and our minerals plundered by Western hands? You say you are objective, but your silence is never neutral. Your words are weapons, and we have felt every wound. When we defend ourselves, you call it aggression. When we demand justice, you label it extremism. When we rise in unity, you brand it a threat to global security. Whose security? Certainly not ours. You amplify the voice of every defector, every traitor who sells their conscience for your airtime. But you ignore the voices of those who walk barefoot for miles just to vote. You ignore the youth building solar panels in villages you refuse to visit. You ignore the women who farm our lands while carrying nations on their backs. You do not fear violence in Africa. You fear the African order. You fear peace that you do not control. You fear leadership that answers to its people, not your boardrooms. Let me be clear, we are not anti-Western. We are anti-domination. We are not anti-whites. We are anti-supremacy. We are not anti-progress. We are anti-exploitation masquerading as progress. Your media empires are crumbling because people are awakening. Not just in Africa, but in Latin America, in Asia, even within your own streets. Or the global south is no longer your story to tell. It is our truth to live and to defend. So publish your op-eds, spin your narratives, call us rebels, dictators, and admin. History will not remember your headlines. It will remember our resistance. You want us quiet. You want us grateful for crumbs while you dine on the feast we grew. But we have tasted our power. And once the lion remembers who he is, does not beg for approval from the hunter. This is our war too, and it will not be edited. It will not be rewarded, and it will never be silenced. The age of African reckoning. You call us unstable, but it is your hands that have shaken our foundations for decades. You destabilized our governments and then blamed us for the cracks. You engineered coups and then warned the world about our instability. You flooded our nations with weapons. And now you pretend to be surprised by the fire. You created chaos and built careers documenting our pain. You turned our suffering into headlines, our struggles into footnotes. And when we dared to heal on our own terms, you called it rebellion. But let me tell you what you fear the most. It is not our guns. It is not our protests. It is not even our refusal to kneel. What you truly fear is this: a continent that can think for itself, You fear the young Burkinab child who reads Sankara instead of Shakespeare. You fear the Malian farmer who chooses his ancestral wisdom over your laboratory seeds. You fear the Ghanaian woman who says we will trade in our own currency. You fear the African who is no longer enchanted by the Western illusion. The age of deception is dying, and a new Africa is being born not in your studios but in our streets. Not through your think tanks, but through the awakening of a people who have remembered their worth. We are building something sacred, a sovereignty that cannot be televised, a freedom that will never fit into your press briefings, a unity that terrifies those who can no longer divide us. We are not against dialogue, but we reject dictation. We are not against cooperation, but we will not submit to conditional partnerships. We are not against information dispute, but we will no longer accept your version of the truth as gospel. We will tell our own stories. We will raise our own voices. We will define our own heroes. And yes, some of us will stumble. Some of our revolutions will be messy, but they will be ours. Not bought, not borrowed. Ours. So keep watching us, keep filming, keep writing your clever articles. But understand this truth. You no longer own the lens. Africa has picked up the camera, and this time we are focusing it on the truth. Unfiltered, unapologetic, and unbreakable. The spirit that cannot be colonized. You have studied our borders, but you have never understood our soul. You dissect our economies, but you cannot measure our spirit. You calculate our GDP, but you have never grasped the wealth of a people who still sing in the dark. You see a continent. I see a cradle of civilizations. You see poverty. I see a people rich in memory and strength and sacred purpose. We are not emerging. We are awakening. And the sound of our awakening will drown out your commentary. Let me ask you, what's the media? Why do you fear African faith? Why do you mock our prayers, our ancestors, our spiritual roots? Is it because you know that a people grounded in God cannot be moved by propaganda? You came with cameras on. We came with courage. You came with questions. We came with convictions. You came to report on our demise, but you will end up witnessing our deliverance. You call this the age of information, but what use is information without integrity? You flood our feeds with your version of facts, but we have learned to see through the noise. Your press badges do not make you prophets. Your networks do not define reality. And your silence does not absolve you of complicity. In Burkina Faso, we no longer chase Western validation. We seek something deeper, divine alignment. We are not merely trying to survive global systems. We are building a life outside of them. The old Africa was reactive. This Africa is proactive. The old Africa explained itself to you. This Africa answers only to its people and to its God. You tried to colonize our minds. You failed. You tried to suppress our voices. You failed. You tried to pit us against each other. And you are still failing, because we have seen too many of our children die with names you refuse to pronounce. Too many of our elders buried with dignity denied. Too many of our nations stripped and shamed for being naked. But not anymore. We stand not just with words but with will. Not just with flags but with faith. Not just in protest but in prophecy. This is not merely about Burkina Faso. This is about every land that has been lied about. Every people who were told to be grateful for chains. Every continent that was told it could not rise without permission. So we are no longer asking. We are no longer waiting. We are no longer explaining. We are reclaiming time. Our identities, our story, our destiny. And no headline will stop what heaven has already declared. We are the headline now. You came to define us. Now we define ourselves. You came to narrate our collapse. Now you are witnessing our resurrection. No longer will we be a paragraph in your foreign affairs section. No longer will our children grow up learning your victories while forgetting their ancestors. No longer will our leaders be measured by how fluent they are in your language or how submissive they are in your presence. Our standard is not Paris. It is not Washington. It is not London. Our standard is the soil from which we came. The drumbeat of our ancestors, the cry of our martyrs, the dignity of our mothers, and the dreams of our children. You look at me and see a soldier, but I am not just a man in uniform. I am a messenger of generations who bled for a future they were never allowed to see. I carry not just bullets, I carry burdens. The burden of truth, the burden of justice, the burden of a people who refuse to be forgotten. You wanted to frame me as a dictator, but I served no empire. I answered to no foreign master. And that to you was the real crime. What frightens you is not Ibrahim Traoré. It is what he represents. A man who bows only to his people and his creator. A man who does not ask for applause from those who orchestrated our pain. So you dig, you invent, you speculate, you enable it all, because that's all you have left, libels. But here's what you don't understand. When the truth begins to rise, no amount of ink can bury it. When a nation finds its voice, no propaganda can mute it. And when Africa wakes up, the world must adjust. We are not perfect. We have wounds. We have lessons to learn. But we are no longer learning from you. We are learning from our past. From Sankara, from Nkrumah, from Lumumba, from our own scars. We are building not just roads, but resolve. Not just governments, but generations. Not just armies, but alliances rooted in African values. So if you must report on us, do so honestly. But if you cannot, then keep your cameras, keep your microphones, keep your opinions, because whether you broadcast it or not, Africa is rising, with or without your applause, with or without your permission, with or without your spin. We are the headline now, and the story is only beginning. This letter is not for you alone. I did not write this letter just for your editors, not just for your anchors or your journalists. I wrote it for the African child watching the news and wondering why his people are always the villain. I wrote it for the daughter of the soil who was taught that her skin is a curse and her story a footnote. I wrote it for the forgotten farmer, the exiled truth-teller, the silenced revolutionary. I wrote it for every heart that beats with the rhythm of the motherland. You see, this letter is not just a response. It is a declaration, a mirror, a warning kiss, and a prophecy. You built empires on our backs. Now we walk upright. You mined our lands for wealth. Now we mine our history for wisdom. You painted our future in grayscale, but we are coloring it in defiant hues of red, gold, green, and black. Let me be clear. Africa is not a charity case. We are not your humanitarian project. We are not your Savannah-themed backdrop for awards and applause. We are sovereign, we are strategic, we are spiritually awake, and we are ready to walk away from any table where we are only served silence and shame. From Ouagadougou to Bamako, from Niamey to Kinshasa, the winds have shifted. The young no longer ask for viciously demand vision. The poor no longer wait for a deity-built alternatives. The educated no longer seek Western praise, they seek African purpose. And I, Ibrahim Traoré, am simply a servant of this wave. I do not stand above the people, I stand among them. Because true leadership is not about how loud your voice echoes in foreign halls, but how deeply your heart beats for your homeland. So publish your think pieces, write your op-eds, film your documentaries. But know this talk, your headlines will not halt the harvest we are sowing in silence. Your doubts will not disturb the divine shift taking place in Africa. And your predictions will fall like dust before the rising storm of African unity. We are not angry, we are not bitter, we are awakened. And that is far more dangerous to your systems than any weapon or speech. This is not the end of a letter, it is the beginning of a legacy. Signed, not with ink, but with conviction, not with apology, but with truth. That from the heart of Burkina Faso to the soul of every African breathing beyond borders. We see you, we hear you, and we rise together. No apologies, only purpose.